Okay, perfect. Recording has started. Good morning, afternoon, evening to you all. Thanks to those who are joining live or watching the recording. This is Service Fabric webcast number 62. It is not under NDA, so we will be sharing the recording afterwards to the YouTube channel and the Azure Connections community. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to add them to the chat or raise your hand or come off mute and ask your question. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sakanya for her to take it away.
Thank you, Miguel. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the 60-second tech community call. I'm joined here by Mike, Divya, Ankur, and Yelena from the Service Fabric side. And today we have an info pack session that we're going to try and cover within the next 50 minutes. Here's what we're planning out. I am going to present the deck. Let me know when you can see it. Thank you. So the agenda for today is we are going to cover Service Fabric runtime, the release that's coming up right next. What are the content that we're trying to do, cover in it, and these are just teasers. So it's by no means a full list of all features that we're adding to the release. We're also going to kind of make notable calls to some of the items that we will be retiring or deprecating moving forward, and we'll discuss timelines. After that, I'll hand it off to Mike, who will be talking about Spot VMs in Surface Fabric managed clusters and the semester roadmap, and then we can open it up for Q&A. Um, just a quick note, while I am talking about Service Fabric runtime, if you have questions, please go ahead and post them into the chat window. Mike, Divya, Ankur, and Yelena will be monitoring the chat window. So if you have questions, they will be chiming in. So let's get started with that. Release Nano, which is coming up pretty soon. It's got quite a bit of features and interesting key areas that we have been focusing on for the last, I would like to say, 6 months. Um, so with that, some of the teasers. But before we go into the list, I want to explicitly call it out that the list mentioned here is by no means a full list. We are just covering a few key items that we've been kind of receiving a lot of pings about, a lot of questions regarding. So this is by no means a full list. We will be publishing the release notes pretty soon. We're expected to kind of publish that probably mid next week, and that release notes will contain the complete detail list. So if you're looking for a whole list with documentation links, um, please look forward to the release notes that's coming up. All right, general availability of some of the key features. There are some features which have been in private preview or public preview for the last few months and last few releases. And we are now finally making some of these key features as generally available. The biggest of them all is the .NET 6.0 support. There have been quite a few folks who've been asking for this, and to figure out what timelines we will have it. So, well, it's now going to be generally available starting release version 9.0. Just a few small callouts in it, like we are supporting minimal hosting models with .NET 6.0. We are supporting iHost and iHost Builder interface support. We will be supporting data contract serialization. It is currently an opt-in option, but for remoting exceptions. These are, again, by no means a full list. There are other things that have been in preview for a while now, like the Kestrel communication listeners, and that's just one example. But those will also become live and generally available with this feature. The next one that we are calling out is support for Ubuntu 20.04. we are making OS images available and clearly documenting a migration path for existing clusters from 1804. We are also supporting command-based local cluster creation. The one thing that is coming up soon, which is usually done after we roll out new versions of Ubuntu, is enabling it through the portal. Now, that is not released yet. That will be coming once this release goes public. The other thing that we've been in preview for a while now, that we are now making generally available, is the support for multi-AZ VMSS clusters. Uh, and now with this general availability, it should support both parallel as well as hierarchical upgrade modes. Some other teasers, we are going to start supporting managed key vault reference support as part of Nano, which essentially means that Service Fabric can monitor your key vault and automatically trigger rolling application parameter upgrades as the secrets and kind of rotate in your key vault. The second one is parallel recursive queries for SFDNS service support. This is essentially to have faster DNS response time. So we're parallelizing, we support parallelizing calls to multiple DNS service, and the first response is basically picked up as the response. Um, the third one that I've called out here is essentially about addition of instance ID. Now, to report the health of guest applications, generally partition ID, replica ID for stateful services, and instance ID for stateless services are required. So far, we have published and documented having partition ID and replica ID as part of the environmental variable list. We are now adding instance ID for stateless services as well. The last is creation of local Linux service fabric clusters on Windows using WSL. We've been working on this for a while and been working with the Visual Studio team to integrate it as well. Um, so this is just some of the teasers. If you want, again, I'm calling it out. If you want a full detailed list of all the new features, new APIs, and the bug fixes and key areas that have gone into the 9.0 release, please look forward to the release notes. Some upcoming retirement or deprecation path callouts. We have been calling some of these out in the release notes as well, but I'll start with some. Support for binary formatter as a serialization mechanism has been deprecated across Microsoft. So we have been working towards removing that, or we've been working towards kind of deprecating that from Service Fabric as well. So that is one of the reasons we kind of introduced the data contract serialization based remoting exception as part of 9.0. So we are recommending people start moving to using DSC-based remoting exceptions. So because moving forward at some point, we will be deprecating binary formatter. Second call out, again, something that we've been calling out in the release notes for a while now, is support for Ubuntu 16.04. We have kind of put it on deprecation path already, but we will be retiring it soon. So we are recommending that folks kind of upgrade to a slightly newer version of Ubuntu, which is still under service life, including 18.04, or if you prefer 20.04. Support for .NET will be deprecated soon. Now, .NET 5.0 is going to kind of reach end of life somewhere in the beginning of May. So that is one of the reasons we kind of are releasing .NET 6.0 general availability as part of 9.0 release, so that folks can start moving out to using a newer version of the framework. So we recommend that you kind of move to 6.0 or .NET Core 3.1. Support for older core versions like 2.1 will be deprecated soon. Again, we're recommending folks move out to .NET Core 3.1. Support for ASP.NET Core 1.1 will be deprecated soon. We have been kind of racing this as well in the release notes. We are recommending folks start moving to ASP.NET Core 3.1 or greater. And the last and most importantly, and this is kind of something that I would like to know as a poll, probably, if you guys are aware of people using Service Fabric runtime versions 6.4 or older, please do add it to the chat window as well. But one of the things that we are trying to do moving forward will be the archival or removal of older versions of Service Fabric, which is 6.4 or older. And what we're recommending is folks move out of those versions and move to a more recent or supported version of Service Fabric. All right, key important thing, timeline. So we are looking at rolling out the Service Fabric 9.0 version to the cloud regions on or potentially before May 2nd. So it'll start the rollout before May 2nd. And of course, it takes about 7 to 10 days to do a full rollout. I'm going to pause at this point. If there are any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask. Otherwise,
Sure, just repeat just so they're in the recording. Will the .NET 6.0 support include the template updates in VS 2022?
has already rolled out with the template updates.
Great. And then will AZ support for the VM scale sets be supported with managed service fabric?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat the question again, please?
Apologies. Yeah. Will the multi-AZ VM scale set support be supported in managed SF? Mike already answered this, but just capturing it in the recording.
Oh, okay. Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I just want to capture it in recording. So SFMC or managed clusters does support AZ resilient clusters today. The feature, why I think what was asking was flip back real quick, Sukanya, if that's possible. The feature that was called out about the multi-AZ VMSS, real quick, just so there's a reference while I'm talking to it. The multi-AZ VMSS here is we are GAing this support. So this is something that's been in preview for a long time for SFRP or standard Azure Service Fabric clusters. So this now brings this to GA parity. So you can do a single VMSS that's spanned across 3 AZs. But SFMC does support spanned clusters also in GA.
Great. Thanks.
Any other questions, Whit? I think that's it.
I mean, my last one was just answered too. Any hope for Linux support with managed SF and this for a future release?
Saurabh kind of just put an answer to, but not yet. So getting a little ahead of ourselves. I want to talk about the roadmap, but it's not currently in the plan. Let's talk about the plan, or let's probably move ahead and then we can get to that. But yeah, we'll continue to evaluate that over the next few months here for a future release. But
right.
Anything more about the runtime? Sorry to jump around, but
no, I guess a lot of it will just wait till next month after I review the release notes, I guess.
Yeah, and we do have a Q&A session at the end of this deck as well. So thank you, Mike. With that, I'll hand it off to Mike to talk about Spot VMs. Mike?
Hello. So I want to highlight one particular feature here that we've released in preview. And I'll hand this off to Ankur, who is newer to the SFPM team here and also helping me out in the Service Fabric Managed Cluster space. So without further ado, Ankur, you want to go ahead and talk about this feature release? Next slide, Sukanya.
Ankur, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Still not audible, Ankur.
Okay, sounds like he has some technical challenges. Ankur,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Mike and Sukanya. As you all know, so the customers use Service Fabric to manage both stateful and stateless microservices at scale. So while our customers love the scalability and reliability of Service Fabric, features, they are looking for us to further optimize their costs as well. So we have launched this new feature where we now support Spot VMs on Service Fabric managed clusters. Spot VMs allow users to take advantage of Azure's unused capacity at a significant cost savings. With Spot VMs, you can purchase unused compute capacity at deep discounts, and deep discounts of up to 90% compared to pay-as-you-go prices. So this is a great offering in terms of cost efficiency for the workloads that can handle interruptions and are not time sensitive. So at any time when Azure needs the capacity back, the Azure infrastructure will evict those Spot VM instances. So these are recommended for like workloads such as development, testing, and other batch processing jobs. One thing to note here is that this Spot VMs is currently supported on secondary stateless node types. And as you can see in the JSON, we need to set both is stateless and is Spot VM properties to be true for this to function properly. And I think when deploying a Service Fabric cluster with stateless node types, it's required to have at least one primary node type, which is not stateless in the cluster. So yeah, this is it. We are looking and helping customers optimize their costs on Service Fabric, and we highly encourage folks to test this feature and provide any feedback so we can make any improvements. And the public doc is live at the link that is shown in the PowerPoint, and we have sample templates as well on GitHub. The link is already there. So any questions if you have? Yeah.
Sure. I guess I keep accidentally typing it, but I guess can Spot VMs be coupled with non-Spot? Like to say, always have at least 3 VMs, non-Spot with its node type, but then if there is additional compute needed, supplement with only Spot VMs.
Help, Bunker, if that's fine. So right now the support is across the entire node type. So you set a parameter for Spot VM for a given node type. There's no mixing and matching right now. But just to make sure it's clear, right, that you do have to have a separate primary node type at least as a minimum before you have a secondary stateless. But within that stateless node type, it's either going to be all Spot or all not Spot, more normal, if you will, for now. It's a good question, and it's something we have been exploring and thinking about to kind of have a, just to kind of repeat your question in chat, but like, can you have a minimum set of non-Spot VMs to keep the minimum set of capacity alive and then kind of burst up, or continue to try to get to 5 or 10 nodes and provide additional capacity to accelerate that workload, if you will, when possible.
Exactly.
So,
especially if you could go, I mean, this would be a future release, go a step further and support stateful node types. If I, especially for actors where, there's just not a whole lot of demand, all of a sudden, at least one of the replicas is saved in the permanent nodes, but then spin them up if suddenly there's this heavy demand.
Yeah, understand. So for that kind of bursting thing right now, the suggestion, a high level at least initially, would be in this preview. So great to understand these scenarios more. Have a node type with regular VMs in it, and a secondary stateless node type, and then have an additional secondary stateless node type that's only Spot, and then balance your workload across those, right? So as the Spot VM node type is available, you can use that extra burst workload. If it disappears randomly, you can continue on the other node type. Okay. Not as simple as you maybe necessarily want it to be, but that is something that should function okay right now.
Good starting point, though.
Yeah. And to your comment about stateful, it's something we're thinking about this. This is our dipping our toes in the water here. Spot VMs, as Ankur was saying, Service Fabric is meant to be resilient in its core, so it doesn't necessarily like things disappearing under the covers. So this is our dipping our toes in the water to really explore this further and see how far we can take it.
Sure. I mean, even if like 2 of the 3 replicas were always saved somewhere permanent, and then that last one, maybe it just disappears out of the blue. Even, especially from a cost perspective, at least a third of the cluster being a lot cheaper than the rest of it would be huge.
Yeah. Understand. Any other questions about this? Bunker, do you have anything to add? Sorry, I hope that helped.
That was really helpful. Thank you, Mike. No questions from my end.
Okay, then we can move to the next slide. So, Mike, do you want to go into the semester roadmap thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just time
All
check. How
yours.
much time do we have, an hour today or 30 minutes? I just want to know roughly.
It was scheduled for an hour, so you're good to go.
Okay, I'm gonna be like super fast here then. So, Service Fabric Managed Clusters Roadmap. So, this is a whole lot of text on the screen, but I just want to flash this up again. So last time we talked back in February, I highlighted a bunch of new GA features. So this list is now inclusive of those. For those that haven't seen this list, there's a lot of stuff here, and all the relevant public documentation exists for how to use all of these features. So I just want to highlight this list continues to grow. There's a whole set of features here that we have available as part of the GA offering of SFMC. I just want to pause here for the audience. Were there any questions on the current GA list before I move on to forward looking? And I apologize, it says auto score there. Auto scale, not auto score. Auto correct is so bad about that. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go ahead and move on. So if we can, next slide, please. So we have a set of upcoming features planned for the upcoming months, next 5-6 months. We don't have particular slots defined for them yet, where and when they will land. But I would expect these to land at one or more preview APIs that are upcoming. So I just want to start with Spot VM. I won't go in all these, but I have enough time, so maybe I will. Spot VM is now launched in preview, as Ankur just discussed. So please, use this feature, provide us any feedback, any scenarios that it may not be covering. Oops, there was a question. Oh, you looked mentioning this here. We are working on portal enhancements. So this has been a big pain point of ours. So we're enhancing 3 key areas, I'll call it right now, and I can demo this a little bit. I don't want to show you stuff that's not committed yet. Well, so we are working on enhancing the scaling experience. So what I mean by that right now is if you use Portal, there's basically just a minimal slider left or right. You can slide from 3 nodes to 5 nodes to 10, or all the way up to 100, right? And click OK. So the scaling experience will be modified to include the native auto scale delayed experience. So that means we will have native or fully compatible with the auto scale experience. If you've seen that on the VMSS side, so you can configure a given secondary node type to be manual or auto scale all through a single pane of glass. So that's what this is really hammering home, is really trying to make the auto scale experience more native and fully integrated in the portal experience. Node level management. So today, right now, we only have node type experience, and it's pretty minimal. The node level management will allow you to actually see the node level view similar to SFRP, where you go and see nodes today, and then allow you to view activity, performance metrics, take actions like reboot a VM safely, or do basic triage, if you will, that is completely hidden today and requires you to go to the underlying resource group and go to VMSS and go look at VMs that way. So we're trying to remove and completely remove that need, I should say, just to be clear, and stick with the resource provider front end. So that'll provide that. There'll be more details there and more demos in the future around that. The managed by information. So this has been another struggle, and we want to make it a lot clearer to customers that when you create an SFMC cluster, the managed cluster creates an encapsulated resource group. And for people that have used this product, this should be familiar. If you haven't, we create a resource group with SFC underscore cluster ID. And what happens is customers will end up in that resource group, and they do today have write permission to resources or assets under there. And we want to make it clear that if you land in that resource group, that there's a clear message that this is a managed by resource group. So folks understand and can then click and go back up to the SFMC resource provider. So this should help eliminate confusion and drive people back upwards, if you will, to the right place where they should be doing management operations, because you should not ideally be doing any management operations on the encapsulated resource group, because the resource provider can't overwrite any of those changes. So I hope that's clear. And I see some feedback, so good. Maintenance window support. So this is, we'll see how far along we go this. You know, these are always subject to change, but we want to offer customers maintenance windows. So if you want to define, I want patching AutoOS upgrades to only occur during, you know, business hours or off business hours, for example, or on weekends or not on weekends, that's what this is alluding to. I'll keep that one pretty short and sweet. Okay, so going back to the manage by one, block write access. So this will be a huge fundamental shift and a huge improvement. But from my point of view, our point of view, we require a lot of these portal enhancements to be in place for this to be really successful, I think, because we have to allow customers to manage the resource properly before we block them from doing actions on the underlying resources. But this is specifically calling out that as a default model, hopefully within the next 6 months here, we will by default block write operations to the underlying SFC underscore resource group. So that means you go in there, you still have read-only access to see stuff, but you will not be able to go in and modify the VMSS group, for instance, or firewall rules or things like that directly and the managed by resource group, so the encapsulated resources. So this protects customers, protects us, and helps just move this platform to be a lot more stable and secure, and guarantee availability, right? So we want to make sure that things are resilient here and working as we planned and as described. In place zonal resilience migration. So I'll pause after this to read chat just to make sure I'm not missing anything. This will support, or we're simplifying the experience from taking a deployed managed cluster from a 1-zone deployment to a 3-zone deployment. There'll still be some steps involved, but we've created an API and we'll publish this hopefully in the coming weeks, next 2-3 weeks, that soon. And this will take your primary node type and move it to a zone resilient, a 3-zone setup, all in place. You don't have to redeploy your workloads. You'll have to move them across. There will be instructions provided, but this would be a lot simpler experience than what exists in SFRP today. So.
Did you say that you only have to do that with a primary node type?
Yeah, and there's caveats in the documentation, nuances I'll say, but essentially we have to migrate the VMSS, kind of to that earlier point, if the VMSS has to move to a zonal span VMSS, so there'll have to be some migration there. But yeah, maybe if it's okay, let's pause on that, but sure. Keep it high level right now, but there'll be a lot more descriptive detail in the instructions public documentation when that goes live.
Great.
The in-place, thanks for asking though, in-place VM SKU modification. So this has been, again, another simplification ask. And again, kind of when we block write access to encapsulated resources, we want to make it as easy as possible to do modifications. So we want to allow, where possible, you to modify your VM SKU set. And there will be caveats and limitations here again, right? Just be clear. Let's say I want to go from 2 CPU to 4 CPU within the same family. That's a scenario that this should support pretty clearly. So if you have a DB2S or DB4S SKU with 2 CPUs, you'd just be able to click a drop down or issue an API call and switch that over to 4 in place. Let me pause. I see a lot of chat. Is there any questions? I need to. Yep, okay. Let me continue. Let me finish this and then we can pause. So bring on VNet. I think what you were mentioning in chat, yay. So bring on VNet support. We want to expand the bring on VNet support to allow customers to configure a subnet per node type. So today, to be clear, when you set up bring on VNet, you only establish or connect it to one subnet that we just use for all the node types, all the IP allocation. So then, yeah, this will allow you to expand it. So node type 1, you can give it a subnet 1 allocation. Node type 2, you can give subnet 2 allocation, yada, yada, yada. So this will enable customers to fit it to their network patterns more than having it forced to fit our network pattern and dump everything in one subnet, which is not ideal. By any means. So I've heard you loud and clear there. Auto OS upgrade enhancements. So we intend to focus on 2 primary areas. We want to allow or enable failure notifications. So allow you to subscribe or get pushed, hey, something's not occurring correctly, and be told more proactively versus logging in 5 months later like, oh no, my OS upgrade hasn't succeeded in the last 3 months, right? So we want to make sure customers are aware of things going wrong and if they need to take corrective action. And also allow customers to invoke an API to kick off manual invocation, right? So what if it fails? How do I take corrective action? Again, kind of going to this portal experience and allow customers to take corrective action. So this does not exist today. It's all completely automated and you have to wait for the next monthly cycle, which is not ideal. This will allow you to just kick it off if you've corrected the applications in error state, for instance. Application gateway support. I'll probably keep this quickly in NAT gateway. We've been asked to support 2 other additional connectivity options, if you will. Application gateway will be an alternative to setting up a load balancer. And NAT gateway allow customers to configure NAT gateway, which allows huge scaling for snap pool exhaustion, port exhaustion problems that they may be facing. There is additional cost with both of these, so you have to be aware of that. But we are exploring and adding both of these. So I've talked a whole lot. I hope that helps. Like I said, this is all just kind of high level right now. There'll be a lot more details, as you should hopefully expect by now from us in public documentation as these move to preview. Any questions, please? Yeah, if you come on verbal chat, if there's questions I need help answer.
Yes, just the one that Alexander pointed out was, especially if you're blocking the write access to the resources in the resource grid, that makes sense why you're wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, at least in the short term, or I guess, would you at least support a managed way of adding private endpoints to these load balancers before you block off that access?
Private endpoints to the load balancers.
So,
probably...
if we have, if we need to
the managed load balancer, or
exactly.
to bring to the managed
Exactly.
load balancer, and we will. Yeah, if you want to send me a note about that scenario, or Alexander, you can reach me at mike.craft@microsoft.com, and can you help describe your scenario, and we can talk about bringing in that support. Yeah, we definitely support that via aux subnets and internal load balancers, or bring your own load balancer scenario in general. Modifying the built-in managed load balancer, we have to be careful about and look at exploring pulling in another API call, essentially, yeah. In the block write access, this is still in development, right? But we're also exploring, well, can customers actually override that as a temporary measure or something? So it's still a possibility. But okay, thank you. Sorry, Alexander was saying he will do that in chat, so people watch the recording. Thanks, Whit, for bringing that on verbal.
All right, thank you, Mike. So we're now just going to open it up for any other questions you might have for any of the things that's been presented. So feel free to unmute and ask the question.
I guess just for the general community's sake, will any of this roadmap stuff be published on the GitHub repo?
For the managed cluster?
We plan
Well,
to
just any of it.
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking on mute. We plan to clean up the roadmap on GitHub. Some of the features that we work on are more interesting for internal customers, so we'll leave those out. But yes, we'll provide updates for the time being on GitHub, and we'll communicate the road forward, in which we'll keep you guys updated with our future direction as well as the roadmap.
Great.
Thank you, Sarabjit. Any other questions?
There's one more in chat. I don't know if you can see it, Sukanya. Do you want me to ask or just verbalize it?
Thanks, Mike.
Do you see it, or? Do you want me to verbalize
Yeah,
it?
he has
No,
said he
I
can't come
don't
off
see the
mute
chat
today.
window while
Oh,
I'm
okay.
present. Yeah,
Alexander was
sorry, go
asking,
ahead.
sorry. What's the scope of iHost Builder Support? Is it replacing the service runtime register service, or is it limited to registering it and create service instance listeners, what we have for ASP?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? If that's for me, I
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah, it's for you. He's asking in general, what's the scope of iHost Builder Support? Is it replacing service runtime register service, or limited to registering it and create service instance listeners?
So this is where I would kind of ask you to wait, but general answer is it's not limiting. It's still working in collaboration with registering services. We still support the iWeb host, but we'll have a lot more detail in the documentation that gets published along with the release notes. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it's just a 50,000 feet view answer right now.
Oh, I guess will this release come with updates to the YARP bits?
That is maintained outside of the service side runtime release cycle. So the YARP bits, do you have a general question about YARP, or you're just curious about the release timing?
Just more curious release time and I guess when it will support path-based routing.
Okay, but yeah, let's take that offline. But yeah, the YARP is not tied to the SF release cycle.
Good to know.
Okay, any other questions? We will continue to monitor GitHub as well as Yammer for questions even after the release notes go out. So if you have specific questions, please feel free to reach out. Some of these things, as Sarabjit mentioned, we will be kind of publishing with more details. And when we do, you can always reach out to any of us and we'll continue to monitor questions.
I guess just to clarify, you had said the release notes were probably being published next week. Is and the general rollout happening then as well?
Right, the release notes go out mid of next week, possibly give or take a day or two, and the rollout will start anytime before May 2nd, which is the Monday after. So it could be sometime next week, it could be all the way up to May 2nd. But then it takes about 10 days for all the public rollout to happen. So it's just starting before, on or before May 2nd. But the release notes go out mid next week.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Sorry, Megala, all yours.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just going to close us out if there were no other questions. So thank you all to the presenters today. Thanks to those who are joining live and or watching the recording. We will be sharing this recording out to the YouTube channel as well as the Azure community. So please be on the lookout for that. If you have not already done so, please take a moment to provide your feedback on this particular webcast, as well as letting us know what topics you would like to hear going forward. With that said, have a great day, everyone, and thank you all again for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.